Oh, hello, and welcome to Dark Passages. Dark Passages is a weekly podcast presented by me, Chris Stone, reading stories I've written over the past 15 years or so. Today we will continue Route 66 with episode 2.
Herman?
His mother stared at him with her crossed idiot eyes as he swabbed pus from her halo entry wounds with an alcohol wipe. His mother stared at him with her crossed idiot eyes as he swabbed pus from her halo entry wounds with an alcohol wipe. Herman was her cousin, whom she hadn't seen in 30 years, and for some reason over the past few months her diseased mind had morphed Rain into him. You see, the accident hadn't just robbed her of movement, it had also greedily stolen a good chunk of her memories. At first he corrected her, reminding her that he was in fact her son Rain, but anymore, it was just easier to let her believe whatever she wanted. Yes, Sylvia? He'd decided to start calling her by her name. If she didn't know him as her son, then did he need to know her as his mother?
We used to have good times, didn't we? Back in the park.
Her crossed eyes began to glisten. Yeah, we did. Rain agreed absently, smearing blood and pus on the smooth steel that was holding her together. Her head lolled, wanting to collapse again, but the halo was keeping everything as upright as achievable. Her unfocused eyes stared out the hospital window while he cleaned her. This was their relationship now, mother and halo cleaner. He'd parked the wheelchair that she was now bound to by the window so that she could watch the birds outside swoop into the feeder and gobble seeds before they took back to wing and moved on. She now lived full time in a nursing facility with the rest of the elderly and decrepit, someplace on the south side of town called Sunnier Days Retirement Home, a euphemism that always made Rain chuckle. I mean, what in the actual fuck could the Sunnier Days be referring to? The cold, sweet embrace of death himself? But that's just how those places were. Everything with a name that didn't quite fit. Retirement homes that made themselves seem like something more than just God's waiting room. These active senior establishments with their unused pools and tennis courts offering luxuries that the dying residents could only dream of using, calling themselves Sunny Acres or Happy Fun Time Shithouse. It was all marketing. He kind of wished just one crematorium would name themselves something fitting, like in law incineration or family conflagration. But no, it was always sunshine and lollipops, good time family departure. Lies to put everyone at ease while they discussed torching their dearly departed loved ones. A trickle of drool leaked down his mother's chin, and Rain thumbed it to the floor as easily as he would his own sweat. She looked back at him with crazy eyes full of water.
Remember the birds, Herman?
He nodded, the alcohol white fumes making his eyes water.
I'll never forget the birds.
She mumbled, her eyes flicked back to the window, and then she was silent again. This was how conversations with her went after the accident that Heath had thought she should have avoided. One incoherent thought after another, and then utter silence. Rain scrubbed the last of her halo entry wounds and wadded the bloody gauze in his fist. Standing behind her wheelchair with his hand rested on her shoulder, they watched the birds dine. Those birds that she could never forget. Rain's hand vibrated on the trembling wheel. Moon's feet had smudged his already dirty windshield, but still he drove and watched the dusty world roll on. Hey, so where are you heading anyway? Rain asked after a period of long silence. Moon reclined, staring at the ceiling, and said,
If I said as far as the road will take me, will that be an acceptable answer?
Her fingers began beating a tune on her pale thigh.
You know, you laugh like a man who the world has kicked directly in the nuts one too many times. You laugh like a man with secrets.
Her fingers continued drumming that denim tune. Rain smiled, squinting in the sunlight. Don't we all have secrets? I mean, some of us carry our secrets in fake guitar cases. Others of us simply shove those secrets into the far corners of our brain, tucked away, far behind those already dim childhood memories, and we bury them there.
Well, that's just too bad, Rain. I don't have any secrets. I find it too hard to keep up with them.
You mean like changing your persona on a daily basis? He interrupted.
Oh, that's different. That's just for shits and giggles. Just to fuck with people a little bit. Not really holding on to secrets. But go ahead and ask me something. Ask me anything. And I'll answer you honestly. No need for truth or dare or any of that silly bullshit. My life is an open book, free for interpretation.
She looked up and opened her arms to the sky like a televangelist. Rain thought for a minute, then said, I tell you what, let me chew on it for a bit and see how it tastes. Then I'll get back to you. The blacktop rolled on.
Hey, there's a truck stop ahead. Think we could stop for a Slurpee and some beef jerky or something? God damn, I could go for a snack. It's been a long, dusty day.
Rain checked his wristwatch as though he was on a schedule that he intended to keep. Yeah, I mean, I get, sure, why not? I guess I don't see why not. Of course, he never referred to him as father, dad, or anything like that. This man whom he loathed was simply known as Heath. Heath, what a piece of deplorable human waste. Neighborhood kids would see him and go inside. People head to the other side of the road just to avoid crossing paths with him. Cockroaches avoid him. He was that kind of person. He'd lasted a mere 3 months with his broken wife. So much for through sickness and in health. Those were just some words that you said so you could bed the lady that was agreeing to spend the rest of her life with you. A life that had been destroyed by that drunk driver. Heath didn't have time for paralyzed women that couldn't remember their own names, much less his. He had a life to live, a life that had fuck all to do with Rain and his broken mom. One day he just didn't come home from work, and that was the end of him as far as Rain was concerned. Good riddance, good luck, Chuck. See you in hell, Odell. Heath wouldn't have won Old Father of the Year award if his only competition had been Ted Bundy. Not to say he was a serial killer or even a serial rapist, but he was definitely a serial abuser. Not a summer's last sunset without Rain having something bandaged or wrapped in a cast, or his mother not having to buy a darker shade of oil based concealer for her shiners. Sure, Heath would apologize. He'd say he was a passionate man, and sometimes that was hard to control. He'd bring alcohol kisses that were too little and too late. Last he'd heard, Heath had relocated to some place in Minnesota and was shacking up with a new, bruised, and clumsy woman. Honestly, he could care less. That abusive bastard had left him alone to deal with his decaying mother, so good riddance to him. Gnawing at an especially stubborn chunk of beef jerky, Moon asked,
So, did you think of anything to ask me yet? The time between here and Albuquerque is about as dull as Henry's bone. This is how we're going to liven it up a bit.
He swung the car back onto Route 66, leaving the blazing neon starlight of the only gas station in miles firmly in his rear view. Quickly, the gas station's star receded into the horizon, allowing the all-encompassing desert blackness to again swallow them whole. Keeping the Plymouth balanced between the white dashed lines took all of Rain's concentration. He didn't want to go and have himself a little accident, you know. Just miss a curve and wake up wrapped around a cactus, like mother, like son. Without looking down, Rain dug a pizza flavor combo out of the bag in his lap and popped it into his mouth. Crunching through the pretzel crust, he considered. Did he have questions for her? Of course he did. How could he not? She was fascinating, and yet he knew absolutely nothing about her. So he actually really fucking thought about something interesting to ask her. She was an intriguing enigma, a person with both no persona and all personas at once. She was that dark, dusty weirdo dragging a guitar case through the desert like some mariachi hitman. She had sworn she was a stripper, but he doubted it. Truthfully, he doubted if much of anything she'd said had been true. Some people were just that way. They told you what they thought you wanted to hear. Back when the desert sun was still scorching his corneas, Rain had noticed a tiny puckered sore in the crease of her elbow standing out like an obscenity in defiance of her clear, milky skin. Wasn't the injury that a cutter would give themselves? No, he doubted it was any kind of self harm, but it could be a needle mark. That thought had crossed his mind. But again, it just didn't quite feel right. She didn't seem like the type. Rather, she seemed like someone who would have a story about that mark. Some sort of ridiculous accident in her past that she would now undoubtedly giggle about while regaling. But still, what if it was something more sinister? What if it was a self inflicted stab wound? What if she was a heroin addict? He just couldn't take that chance. He feared an awkward conversation much more than he feared a boring one. So instead, he took the easy way out. So much for offering some great bold conversation starter. Okay, I thought of one. He swallowed his mouth full of chewed combos, washing it down with a swig of the monster energy drink that was sure to keep him going for a few more hours. Are you really a stripper, or a dancer? Are you really a dancer? Moon smiled, her teeth brown with dehydrated beef, her gums candy red from the cherry slurpee she cradled in her lap.
You aren't really going to ask me a common as cornbread question like that, are you?
She returned what was left of her Slurpee to the cup holder and popped the empty plastic straw into her mouth. She chewed it flat and leaned back in her seat, again crossing her ankles on the dash. She plucked the slobbery straw from her pursed lips and motioned with it toward Rain.
You know, I saw that look in your eye a minute ago. You had a real question to ask, a real juicy one, probably. I could see you kicking it around up in there in that old think factory.
The straw bobbed and pitched as she spoke like an accusatory conductor's baton.
No, you don't get to chicken out, my good friend. I want that real question. One that was kicking around up in that noggin of yours. The one you're trying on for size, but didn't like the feel of. That one's interesting. That wasn't everyday drivel like, how's the weather? Or, hey, what do you do for a living? No. That one had something interesting in it.
The straw continued jabbing in his direction. The stars overhead did little to fight the desert blackness. It was just he and her alone in the car, carving a path through that darkness. They hadn't seen another car in miles. She'd seen through him. She'd made him uncomfortable. He stammered, "Oh."
The juicy one, yes, that's the one. Ask me that one.
Rain smiled, his teeth flashing in the darkness. I was going to say okay. He chuckled nervously. Okay, so here's what I was going to ask you. But if I'm prying, just don't answer it. I mean, you're not going to hurt my feelings even a teensy little bit. Moon twirled the straw at him, urging him to continue. He took another swig of his monster energy drink, its familiar euphoric buzz lighting up his brain. Well, honestly, I was going to ask about that mark on your arm. He pointed to the crook of her elbow. What happened there? Moon shifted uncomfortably in her seat, absently fingering the wound, shielding it from Rain's view with her palm like it was an embarrassment. Her embarrassment.
Oh, this.
Her voice took on an unfamiliar, shy tone that he didn't like. She suddenly sounded half her age, and shrinking in her seat, she looked it as well. He immediately wanted to take it back. He knew he didn't want to know the answer. Her shyness hinted at his initial fears. Was it self-harm? Was she a heroin junkie? Look. I said if I was prying, just don't answer. It's fine. It's fine. Just don't answer. He stammered. Outside, that off-balance tire thumped and the desert rolled on. Moon, with her eyes focused on the Plymouth floorboard, massaging her inner arm, mumbled with a seriousness that he wasn't used to from her.
No, it's all right. I told you my life was an open book, so I'll tell you.
Her voice was slow and deliberate, not the gleeful Moon that he'd become accustomed to. Her voice now took on a solemn, reproachful tone, one that he hoped he'd never hear again.
It's not a needle mark, exactly, if that's what you're asking. If I shoot up a little Mexican black dog, then the answer is most certainly no. An emphatic no.
I wasn't. He stammered for reassurance, but it sounded weak and tinged with lies. She popped the straw back into the Slurpee cup and brought it to her lips. She sucked some of the cherry Slurpee through the silly straw, the tiny plastic racetrack flooding with red syrup, one twisty loop at a time. She turned to him with teeth that looked full of blood.
It's an entry wound. I found myself on the wrong side of a metal pokey stick. So if you look closely, you can just make out the stick's V shape, right where it got me.
She held her arm out and pitched her elbow back to better reveal the wound. Her black fingernails traced around the puckered sore. The skin was scarred and inflamed at the same time. It reminded him of his mother's entry wounds, the thick, bloody pus that had spent a summer swabbing from her halo's serrated screws, choking on teary alcohol fumes. But still, Moon's wound was a bit different. Hers had a more, for the lack of a better term, bubbly quality to it, like the flesh had grown back all wrong. A quick glance was all he could handle, and his eyes were back on the road. Shooting stars danced off the Plymouth's hoods as they roared ever westward into that blackness. Hey, so if you don't mind me asking, why's the skin all puckered around the wound? Why does it look like that?
Truthfully,
Yeah, sure, why not truthfully?
um, we, uh, we cauterized the wound with a car's cigarette lighter.
A lighter? Holy shit, I bet that hurt like a motherfucker, Rain blurted.
Hell, you'd be surprised.
She mumbled. Rain was never good at things like this, small talk. He had a tendency to either say too little or way too much. He did not understand conversational nuance. It's probably why he'd been blasting through the desert alone in the first place. With Moon, he'd delved too deep and too fast. He'd gotten too personal, and he regretted it. He chewed on his bottom lip as he drove, the car engulfed in an awkward silence. His eyes glued to the road, Moon still absently rubbing at her wound, staring at the floor. After a few quiet moments, she finally spoke again.
You see, when you're a dancer, some of the guys, they want a little bit more than you're willing to give, and those guys can fuck a duck with a 10-foot truck.
She smirked. The Moon he knew was returning. That quiet, reproachful voice was fading away. Her story was gathering steam. Her embarrassment was abating. He caught her off guard with the question. It had been too personal. But she was leaning into it. She was recovering her comfort.
See, this one sad little fucker a few months ago, he was waiting for me in the parking lot and he stabbed me with a goddamn metal stick. It was something that he'd fabricated to jimmy the locks on the cars he wanted to boost. Well, lucky me on this night, to hell with the car theft, he decided to jimmy me with it. I remember I was done with my shift and heading for my car when I heard someone yell something utterly ordinary like, "You cunt, you're deplorable human excrement, you goddamn prick tease." You know, the gold standards for stripper insults.
They roared past a lit up highway sign that beckoned, less than 60 miles to the Crazy Indian discount shack. A cartoon red Indian raced across the sign, hoisting a tomahawk in one hand, hell bent on slicing through the word discount. Neither paid it much attention.
Of course, I just ignored him. This was about a week before Big Jim started walking us to our cars at night. But you know how it is. One person always has to pay before something is done to prevent tragedy. This is why we can't wear shoes on planes anymore. So anyway, like I was saying, he didn't like the sass in my ass, so he jabbed that thing right at me. Shish kebab the fuck out of my goddamn arm. Oh, he was a real television tough guy, too, if you catch my drift. When he saw that thing bobbing in my arm, blood splurting on the asphalt parking lot like a lawn sprinkler, he just up and ran away. And if I'm being honest, and why wouldn't I be? You know, it really didn't hurt at first. Kind of felt like a bee sting, but not one of those big, fuzzy, fat ones that means business. You know, more like a mosquito bite. Just a quick jab to steal some blood. Then bye-bye. I got other shit to do. But I'll admit, when I looked down and saw that length of metal dangling from my arm, I passed right the fuck out. I woke up next to Crystal plucking that metal monstrosity from my arm. I'll tell you as plain as a drive right here. I'll never forget that spray of blood when she pulled it out. Never. No, like a fucking fountain it was. Straight into the air. You know, like the ones on the strip at the Bellagio. Well, yeah, now to think about it, that's exactly what it looks like. The fucking Bellagio water show. Only it was my blood that was painting the parking lot with hot steam and gore. I remember. It splashed my face, and it was as warm as bath water. I almost passed out again, and who knows, maybe I did. Honestly, time gets fuzzy quickly when you're leaking juice in a parking lot like that. But anyways, I can assure you this. I woke up, came to, or whatever, just in time to smell my cooking flesh. Crystal was standing over me. I still remember she was wearing her fake diamond stripper boots that glimmered in the moonlight like ghosts. She was pressing the car lighter into my flesh, her eyes squinting and her head turned. She was willing to do what needed to be done. but was not quite ready to watch me actually melt. I screamed, watched the stars dance in her boots until I passed out again. Kind of a lovely evening, really.
She sucked more Slurpee up the straw's loop-de-loops, the story told. Rain sat uncomfortably, leading the car through the deserted desert highway, his hands vibrating on the steering wheel. She'd been stabbed, and he'd just made her relive her trauma. He felt sick. This was why he didn't get to know people. This was why he never got past the how's the weather portion of blind dates. He wanted to roll down the window and puke into the hot, dusty breeze. Just send his masticated combos tumbling down the highway at 65 miles per hour. Beside him, still fingering her puckered scar, Moon slowly smiled, revealing one candy red tooth at a time.
Or maybe, just maybe, it's a needle mark left behind from this morning's hit of Mexican black tar. You never can be too sure.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Dark Passages. Please join us next week as the story continues. As always, if you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe, share, and rate and review us on iTunes or wherever else you get your podcasts. Please follow us on dark.passages.podcast on Instagram for additional information and episode release schedules. Original music by Iriamu. You can find more of his music through his Instagram page at iriamu.music or on Bandcamp at iriamu1@bandcamp.com. Original stories are all written by Chris Stone and are available on Amazon as ebooks. I'm Savannah, thank you for listening, and we will see you next week.